Wow. Tucker just went totally nuclear on his former employer. I can't wait to share these comments with you. We're going to get into that, everyone. Plus, it seems that Bud Light, it wants to try and win back, all those fratty voters that it didn't want to have anything to do with, drinkers, I should say, voters. You could tell we're in a political season. Anyway, this new plan, I got to tell you, it smacks of total desperation. Desperation all around. Meanwhile, coming from, the president who, I don't know, is he channeling Mitch McConnell these days? Because, we know he has his moments right now, but this was not good. This was not good. He was speaking there about the hurricane, and he suddenly just didn't really even seem to know where he was. So we got to talk about all of that. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. Great to have you here. We are here live as always, and I just want to say it's great to have you, and I hope that you subscribe. And this is a whole new world, shall we say, as we are all learning together. It is good to have you here. We're sponsored in part by LegacyPMInvestments.com. If you're worried about inflation, if you're trying to diversify into things like gold or silver, these are the guys that you should call, 1-866-589-0560. They'll help you out. I think you can get a free gold guide if you go online, LegacyPMInvestments.com. Again, 1-866-589-0560. Okay, so this is kind of a big deal because he kind of just shot his mouth off a bit in ways that I can't imagine the Fox management will necessarily appreciate, but he's not entirely wrong, but he's also not entirely right. So I'm going to share the comments with you. He basically took a dig at the female management that's there, and I don't disagree that they have a major management problem. I've told you guys about that over and over again. In fact, that was entirely my experience, which was not fun at all. I mean, I can feel and sense where he's going with this, but there's also more to this story. And I'll explain, because these people that he's alluding to, well, there were some other folks behind them. Let's just play it, and then we can dive in. So here's Tucker Carlson, who is really, just willing to say it all and bear it all and go, if you would, a little nuclear on the management team that used to run the place. Here he is speaking with his friend Dave Portnoy, who used to be on Fox, or is like always on Fox. I don't know if he's going to be doing so many Fox business appearances these days. Anyway, take a listen to what Tucker had to say.
Let me ask you this. Before the Fox unwinded.
You mean I got fired?
Yes. Did you think were you ardent, go Fox, go guy, or
My view on Fox hasn't really changed. They let me say whatever I wanted, really, for 14 years, and I'll never stop being grateful for that. And then, obviously, I said too much, and I'm not exactly sure what I said that was bad. No one ever told me, but one day they're like, "Oh, can't have this anymore," and they fired me. And I even told them as they were firing me, like, "It's your business." I made a mental note, never work for anyone else again, and I never will. But I can't be mad about it. I mean, they were great to me. The Murdochs were always nice to me, and one day, for whatever reason, they'd had enough. So my feelings weren't hurt. I was not expecting it.
So were you, for me, when I was with Penn, I knew there were things, it's like, oh, I can't go there. They've made that clear. Did you feel like at Fox you could say whatever you want?
Well, there was always internal, the Murdochs were always nice. They never got in my way at all. They were always super nice to me. But there were, it's a company run by fearful women.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there were always like,
Okay, so that's not going to land well with some people. It's a company run by fearful women, and he kind of just threw that in there. And Dave Portnoy was like, yeah. Again, I have a feeling his appearance on Fox and Friends may just be canceled tomorrow because he's agreeing with him. What I would like to just sort of add to that is, listen, it doesn't matter, right? If you're male or female, if you are fearful, you are bad management. Period. And we had some very fearful people over on the Fox business side that were not female, and they were very fearful. So I think fear is the underlying factor here. I'm just going to say, it's funny, he's taking a dig at women, and I get it, he's got a demo, but I'm going to tell you, it's bigger, broader than that, because these are people that are fearful. And fear is a really debilitating thing, especially within an organization. Organizations need to be run by those generals, right? And then you need somebody out in front that can kind of take the heat and manage the Murdochs, so to speak. I mean, the Murdochs don't want to have to be the bad guy telling Tucker, you can say this, you can't say that. They'll call whoever they need to call. And they did. Now, what's interesting is they believe that a woman was running the place. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think that she was there and is still there in name to run the place and to give the place like a new look, a new facade. Oh, isn't this great? We have a female CEO at Fox News. Aren't we great? But is she really running the joint? See, when I was there, I got the sense that, well, one, she was in over her head. I mean, this was so far beyond. I mean, she started as secretary, had worked there many, many years, had worked her way up to executive producer, and I'm sure was a talented producer. But there is a difference between being a producer on one show and managing an entire network, right? They're two totally different things, and it takes a certain gift, if you would, to manage a big network like that. I've talked about it before. I mean, talent, they're not easy to deal with, and they call us talent for a reason, right? So you have all these big personalities, and everybody wants resources, and everybody's fighting for their time. Everybody's fighting for their guests, and you have to manage that. And if you don't, then it gets a little off the rails. And that's what led perhaps to the Dominion stuff. But what I think was really going on, I don't know this for certain, but I can tell you from my own perspective, when I was there, the place was a free-for-all, and there were a bunch of little fiefdoms, and everybody had very sharp elbows. This is when the current management, that would be Suzanne Scott, who's there now, when she was in charge, I mean, it just kind of came all apart. And you could feel it, you could sense it. And when you have that kind of uncertainty and people don't feel like they have a strong leader, then they get really aggressive in really negative ways. But there was a leader sort of behind the scenes, and he's not there anymore. He got fired like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, maybe earlier this month, around the time that they released their earnings. And that would be a gentleman by the name of Viet Dean. I never say his name right, but I'll spell it for you. Vietdinh. Viet Dean. So he is actually somebody who used to work in the administration for Bush. And he actually was the guy who's the architect of the Patriot Act. I just throw that out there because it's kind of interesting to know. Anyway, this gentleman was kind of the sort of head honcho for what Fox could do, what it couldn't do. And again, he's sort of behind the scenes too. And I have a feeling he had a very heavy hand with Suzanne, who was then put in charge of managing the place. And it's kind of hard to manage the place when you get all this talent, right, wanting to do different things. And then you got this guy who's the chief legal officer breathing down your back. And by the way, this chief legal officer clearly was not very good at his job, because it was under his leadership that the place winds up paying $787 million. Like a quarter of $750 million to Dominion. And by the way, they haven't even gotten through Smartmatic. But this guy's there, and I would bet he's making, I got to look this up because it should be public information given it's a public company, but I would bet that he was making more than Suzanne Scott. He was making around $11 million a year. So finally, like, they settled this thing for $787 million, and somebody realizes, gee, maybe this guy didn't do such a good job. And I do think that he had a very big impact. He was close to Paul Ryan and was sort of like trying to massage things behind the scenes. So when Tucker talks about the censorship, was that coming from Suzanne, or was that actually coming from Viet Dean? But it doesn't change anything. I mean, if you're CEO, right, and you're running around, you're kind of fearful of the chief legal officer, you're fearful of the Murdochs, et cetera, then you're not really able to do your job in the way that you need to be able to do, because then you do get in a situation where you're paying $787 million to Dominion. So then I would just say this guy, they get rid of him and they give him a $23 million parachute. So he gets that plus $2.5 million a year for 2 years. So 23 plus another 5, he's got $28 million just walking out the door. Hey, not bad, right? For a few years' work, especially when you cost the shareholders so much money, $787 million going to Dominion. I mean, that was really and truly bad management. Now, if you want to blame it all on the women that were running the place that were so fearful, I would also say this: why were they so fearful? And by the way, if they're fearful, then what the heck are they doing in the job? Male or female? Again, I ran across my share of men that were fearful at that organization too, and they're still there. So when you have fear that's just permeating the place, you can't actually go out and do your job, right? I mean, there's such a thing as being responsible as a journalist, but not being run by this fear that, okay, what's coming? What's coming down the pike? You know, are they going to go after us? Are they going to take away our license to broadcast on our Fox affiliates? That's actually being talked about right now. And there's a lobbying group that's trying to do exactly that. Are you going to take it seriously when Chuck Schumer says that the entire problem with the country is Fox News and people like Tucker Carlson? Are you going to get fearful then? Because if so, Tucker's going to get fired. Are you going to get fearful when Trish Regan comes out and says, you know what? Everybody's way overreacting to coronavirus. And we got to think about this in logical terms and not politicize it. You're going to say, okay, now we're cutting bait with her. I mean, like, I feel for Tucker. We're simpatico in that way, because it's like, you know, okay, everything's seemingly fine. You think you're fine. And all of a sudden you get a phone call. See ya. I'll see you all right. And I agree with him. No way. It's not worth working for anyone, right? Again, if you have that flexibility, it's sure worth it. But anyway, I think it was a little bit of a dig for sure, but it's not something that's specific to women. Okay. It's just not. What he's really getting at the heart of is fear itself. And when you're so fearful, you can't do your job. I don't know much about Mr. Viet Dean. By the way, here he is. I really don't. But again, I do know that he was the architect behind the Patriot Act, which is debatable on many levels from different perspectives, of course. And I know that he was being paid some $11 million and that they paid him $23 million to get out the door, plus another $5 million. Wow. I mean, considering you lost your company, nearly $800 million, that's a heck of a deal to walk away with. And in terms of the management itself, I'm not sure they're ever going to be able to fix this. I really don't. I think that that's an organization that has kind of, well, jumped the shark, so to speak, in that anybody who's talented enough is going to leave. Anybody who can leave, they're not going to be able to pay these salaries going forward because the industry's changing so much. I mean, it's changing really quickly. And this is a company that doesn't have the money it used to have because it's paying it all to lawsuits. So if the industry's changing and talented people have the opportunity to go direct to the customer, like I'm doing it. By the way, subscribe if you haven't. I think we had the little subscribe thing up there. Make sure that you do subscribe to the show. I so appreciate it. It's great. And it's important right now. It's really important. So if you have this opportunity to be able to go direct to viewers, to listeners, then why would you ever work for a network? I mean, maybe if you want to get some experience under your belt, maybe if you want to try and make a name for yourself, you might have that opportunity. But there's a lot of different ways to do it nowadays. And in order to keep, say, the Hannitys of the world there, they're going to have to figure out how to pay them. And I believe they do pay them a lot. I mean, but they're also paying their chief legal counsel a lot. And it's not really working out. But anyway, if you want to keep paying these people, then the money's going to have to come from somewhere. And this is turning into a business that is no longer a growth business. You've got Disney trying to shed all its TV assets and its legacy television industry businesses, right? Because it's no growth anymore. They know that streaming is the future. And so if you're Fox, you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna just like continue to print money as long as I can. This is what some networks, if you look at the news divisions, right, at ABC News or NBC News, CBS News, and they're running on such thin margins. They're not going to make a lot of money in these things, so they keep cutting back and cutting back and cutting back. And as you cut back on those resources, the talent that you're going to be able to bring in the door, whether it's for the CEO, whether it's for the 9 or 8 p.m. news host, it is not going to be as exceptional as what you might have been able to get in the old days, right? So that's just the reality. I do think it's poorly managed, but I don't think there's really a way out for them. The CNN had the same thing. I mean, they brought in somebody who seemed to have a vision, but landed himself in, you know what, like he just kept stepping in it over and over again over at CNN. And now they get a new guy who's coming from the New York Times, so we know his biases. And the question's going to become, can he sort of rally the troops? Will he have all of those anchors on his side? And not only will he have them on his side, but will they respect his word? Because if you're a CEO and they don't respect your word because they think you're fearful, then you know what? The organization is going to have problems. And I just think that that's where Fox finds itself right now. And I wouldn't entirely blame it on the ladies. I would say that there's plenty of blame to go around, including with the guy who was probably breathing down their neck, that chief legal officer who was probably scared to death, rightly so, apparently. But when you create that kind of chaos and that kind of pressure, it leads to other problems. This is like a lesson in management today. What do you know? We're getting back to our roots here, right? In business. I've always been in business and as a business reporter at CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox Business, of course. And, this is my love and passion. So I'm going to have to talk with you in just a little bit about some of the comments we heard from the president today regarding our economy. Oh boy, he's a guy who needs a class in economics, shall we say. Anyway, before we get to that, we've been talking, of course, about Fox. And Fox is challenged right now because it doesn't entirely know, I think, who it is, what it is, how it can evolve in this changing landscape, especially when you've got pressure from, little upstarts like Newsmax. Again, under really solid management, they'd be looking out for those upstarts. I remember once hearing that Fox was very, very worried about Newsmax. This was under previous management. And I always thought, why? Like, this was back when Newsmax was not live and it had, radio hosts doing shows, and it was like public access TV, and it wasn't even live, right? Like, so it was like really kind of low budget stuff. This is years ago. I mean, maybe 6-7 years ago. I'm like, why would they be worried about Newsmax? Well, you know what? Smart management would be. Smart management recognizes the threat coming before the threat actually hits. Well, now it's here. And now you get a lot of people putting their eyeballs on Newsmax, a lot of people over here with me. Again, don't forget to subscribe. It's great to have you here on Facebook or on YouTube, Rumble as well. You know what? This is a big part of the future. And so you're going to see a lot of viewers divert to these streaming places. Or, they may just, they've also got an aging demographic, so we won't go there. But anyway, Fox has a whole series of problems. And unless they're able to really keep up and stay nimble and have the right person in place that has everyone's back and can kind of anticipate the future before it actually hits them, I think it's going to be just a slow trickle down. It's not going to be an easy path. The company will still do fine, right? They make a ton of money and they'll continue to make money for a while. But is that where you think you're going to be in 20 years? I mean, is that the future of content and television? No, it's just not. So, dying industry. A good one to be out of. I appreciated what Tucker said. He and I will have to talk about that sometime. Anyway, turning right now to Bud Light. Bud Light, another company, as I said, that just doesn't know its way. Bud Light is like perfect. This should be a case study and perfect example of what not to do. Over and over and over again, they keep making the wrong moves. Well, now they're getting really desperate. So they've come up with a new idea to try and reel back in, oh, what do you know, those very beer drinkers that they never wanted. Remember? I mean, Alyssa Heinerstein, she told us, we don't want them.
What does evolve and elevate mean? It means inclusivity. It means shifting the tone. It means having a campaign that's truly inclusive and feels lighter and brighter and different and appeals to women and to men. And representation is at sort of the heart of evolution. You've got to see people who reflect you in the work. And we had this hangover. I mean, Bud Light had been kind of a brand of fratty, kind of out of touch humor. And it was really important that we had another approach.
You just need a whole new approach to destroy $40 billion worth of market cap. When will these people learn? When will they start to respect their viewers, their customers? When will they get that you don't bite the hand that feeds you, for goodness sake? Alyssa, who went to Harvard, like the CEO went to Harvard. And I just say, this needs to be a Harvard case study, because whoever they're graduating there from their business school or their undergrad needs to have a better sort of framework for how not to completely, off your customer, which is what she did. And now they find themselves having gone from the number one beer in the country to, well, definitely not the number one beer. In fact, sales just keep dropping. We got new numbers in again, and it's unbelievable. Every week, they're lower. And everybody else is picking up. By the way, beer sales overall are up 2.2%. So it's not like you can say, well, people are switching to wine or they're drinking spritzers. No, they're still drinking beer. In fact, they're drinking more beer. They're just not drinking Bud Light. So you want to know what Bud Light's big idea is? They're getting into football. I told you about this a couple weeks ago. But in this particular case, they're trying to go out to the colleges because they want to actually get the very same drinkers. They want those frat boys. They want them all back. So here's the plan. Bud Light unveils specialty cans for Georgia football. Okay, Georgia Southeastern football. They got a big game coming up. So now they've got these specialty cans, and they must have done some kind of great big deal with the team and with the school, because it seems that all of the players are going to be on these cans at Georgia Southern, and they're going to give out lots of this free beer. They can't give it away, as we say. And the thinking is, well, you got to show some school spirit. And if you have like a little QR code, which all the beer cans will have, you can scan it for a chance to win a private plane trip right above the stadium. How do you like that? So the irony of this is they are desperately trying to go after those fratty boys, those, fratty drinkers that they really so did not want. Careful what you wish for, guys, right? I mean, again, we were talking about Fox, and I understand Fox's need to try and diversify its audience and maybe bring in some new people. I mean, you always want to grow and expand your audience, but you don't do it by alienating the very people that got you there in the first place, right? And I think a series of things happened. Well, I mean, you can go back right back. I mean, and you wonder how much of this was even Trump, in that the elites, so to speak, didn't want Trump to succeed. There was a whole series of things that happened there at Fox that have sort of resulted in it now being an organization that I think the viewers don't fully trust. And to me, I look at it and say it's really a shame, because it's clearly, a tremendous company, and there's lots of wonderful people there, including, by the way, the CEO, who is a wonderful, wonderful woman and a mom, and doesn't deserve to be thought of as just a woman, right? Again, there's something else going on here. And I think that that's coming from the top. There's a fear factor that's not enabling these people to really do their jobs. Fear is debilitating, and an organization is crushed with all the fear, and they have a lot of it. They don't know which way to turn. Now, why is that? Again, leadership, bad leadership. Anyway, let me turn to somebody who doesn't have a lot of fear and is totally authentic. Two people, actually. That would be Joe Rogan and Oliver Anthony. So, Joe Rogan had Oliver Anthony come to his comedy club there in Texas recently, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, they couldn't believe it when he got up on stage and he sang. Oliver Anthony now has the number 1 and number 2 hits in country music. Just fantastic. Anyway, here he is talking about that authenticity, right? And what resonates. The good thing about the time we're in right now, everyone, is I do think people are getting back to basics in a way that's pretty important. Here I am just talking to you. There's no teleprompter. There's no whiz bang graphics. There's no music. It's just me and you. And I can see all of your comments, and I love having you here. We're going to get to the comments actually towards the end of the program. So I do read them all. And, this is the future. Anyway, Oliver Anthony knows it. Joe Rogan knows it. And here they are talking about Karine Jean-Pierre and the fact that she's tweeting for President Biden. It was exposed recently, and they're just having a really good laugh over this because Joe Biden's not tweeting. I don't think he's ever used Twitter in his life. I'm sure he has no clue how to use it. By the way, I know that President Trump does actually tweet and now does the truth himself. I actually remember I was in the Oval Office with him. We had just done an interview. He had actually sent out quite a tweet about Stormy Daniels. And we won't go there. But anyway, he said something to me to the fact, they don't want me to tweet this. But, I had to defend myself. I just had to. And And I'm like, oh, wow. Well, that's going to create a lot of news. Anyway, the point being, he literally had Twitter right on his phone, right there. And he was tweeting himself. Compare and contrast, shall we say, with Mr. Biden, who definitely isn't tweeting. In fact, it's Karine Jean-Pierre who's doing it all for him, as Joe Rogan gets. And did you hear what Joe said? By the way, they're totally right? Like this is the whole problem. And Bernie Sanders, I don't agree with anything Bernie Sanders says. I am a red-blooded American capitalist through and through. Live free or die, New Hampshire. Those are my roots, where we still have no state income tax or sales tax. And yet somehow we managed to balance our budget and do just fine. Actually, right near my hometown was just named as the number 2 place to live in America. So again, you don't have to tax people to death to make it work. You just have to be a little smarter with your resources. So, Bernie Sanders, despite his politics, I will say this. This is a guy who has been a one-trick pony his whole career, and he believes it. He really believes in socialism, like full on, loves it, which should scare you because this is Comrade Bernie Sanders, should scare you a lot. But at least he stands for something, and at least he's consistent, and that's important. By the way, as to Joe saying that the politicians from the 90s sounded like Nazis, I'm not so sure on that. Because who sounds like a complete fascist here is, none other than Hillary Clinton, because I want to play you, and I'm going to keep playing you this. It's so important that you remember what she said in August of 2020. I could not believe my ears. I literally fell off my chair. Like, I was like, did she really just say that? I mean, of course she did, right? Because they say whatever they need to say, and they'll bend the rules to fit them however they need them to fit. And in this particular case, she was telling one of her former PR people that Joe Biden should not give up. In other words, he should fight. He should have all the legal prep on standby with the election. Here she is saying this in August of 2020, right before November. She doesn't know the results yet. And this is what the comment was. Watch it.
Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances, because I think this is going to drag out, and eventually I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch.
Oh, that's her tactic, huh? He'll eventually win if you don't give an inch. Of course, when Donald Trump and his legal team try to ask a few questions about some voting machines and try and figure out, was this really fair in Georgia or Pennsylvania and some close areas? When they try and take the tactic of maybe we shouldn't give an inch, maybe we should make sure that everything is full on legit, they're suddenly now indicted with 91 counts when it comes to the president. I mean, they're just indicting him for everything. And now in Fulton County, Georgia, they're going wall to wall. They want TV cameras in the courtrooms and the whole 9 yards for none other than, September of 2024. You tell me what that's about. I mean, you heard her. She was willing to do whatever it took. she was advising Joe to have all his lawyers on standby. Al Gore did. Remember hanging Chads in Florida? Like, if we're not in a position as a country to be able to say, okay, well, we can ask questions and we can, trust but verify, to use a Reagan term, can we not have everything verified? And if we ask to have it verified, we're somehow now in violation of the law? This is getting a little wacky, okay? A little wacky, especially considering some other stuff that we've been learning about none other than Hunter Biden. There's some text that the sister somehow, no, forgive me, Hunter sent to his sister, and that's been revealed, saying that he's got to give Pops 50% of his earnings. What's that? And why did he have 20 LLCs right after his dad became vice president? And why the heck was there $11 million transferred into his accounts? This is reported by NBC News. Why was $11 million transferred in from Ukraine between the years 2013 and 2018? Why was he working on the board of Burisma getting $83,000? Let me tell you, $83,000 a month for a board job. A lot of board jobs, they don't even pay $83,000 a year. Like, that is mega bucks, like unheard of stuff. So if this was a quid pro quo, we kind of need to know about that. And instead, they're going after Donald Trump with one of the counts in Georgia being that he retweeted a tweet from OAN. And that in doing so, he's retweeting false misinformation. And I'm just like, wow, like this is not the America we know and love. And so back to Joe Rogan saying that, in the 90s, the politicians, well, they all sound like Nazis now. No, I'd say that they sound pretty darn scary when I hear Hillary Clinton saying stuff like that. I'm going to play it again.
Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances, because I think this is going to drag out, and eventually I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch.
Yeah. Wow. It tells you everything you need to know. Never forget. I'm going to play it from now all through 24 because we all need to remember. Anyway, back to how they were in the 90s. Look, I actually think that they sounded like they made sense back in the 90s. Here's Dianne Feinstein. Poor lady. We can get into that in a second. But anyway, Dianne Feinstein, back when they were trying to put through NAFTA, raising some very real and important concerns. She actually sounds smart.
We are going to have a North American free trade agreement that Mexico must do its share, because the day when America could be the welfare system for Mexico is gone. We simply can't afford it. And I think you've seen the figures to state and local governments of what the cost is. It's over $2 billion in California alone. And I have those figures, if you want them in specific, in my purse. And that's why the issue is now joined with 2 million illegal immigrants. It's a competition for space.
A competition for space. And she said, we cannot be the welfare for Mexico. We cannot be the welfare for Mexico. Or for any other country, right? For that matter. And yet, what's actually happening? We're turning into that. I want to share with you an unbelievable clip coming to us from the local station in Chicago. So they're in Hyde Park. Residents are like, what is going on? You're giving a 6-month free hotel stay to people coming into this country over the border that are getting, shipped in. They get a free hotel for 6 months, and we got homeless people on the street. We got kids that aren't learning math or how to read in school. We've got people that are really struggling. So how does this one make sense? Listen to this woman. It's really, really compelling. And we'll talk about it because I'll tell you, the administration has no answer to this.
I don't want them there. Take them someplace else or send them back to Venezuela. I don't care where they go. This is wrong. You got 73% of the people homeless in this city are black people. What have you done for them?
There were lots of fireworks. over the migrants moving into the Lakeshore Hotel for 6 months, where 300 can be housed. Also, the city says it's a fluid situation and it will need to revisit that timeline.
Wow. And you know what? She's got a point. Like, charity starts at home, right? And we've got such a mess here. Before we go running around trying to fix everything in the world, can we not try to look inward for just a little bit? Take Ukraine. Regardless of what you think about Russia, Ukraine, I don't even want to go there. I want to talk about money. Because the president of the United States, who's now dealing with disasters from coast to coast, literally in Florida and in Maui, is proposing $40 billion of taxpayer money go to a few different places. Let me break it down. He's tying, you see, this disaster relief to Ukraine funding. He wants $12 billion to go to disaster relief here in the U.S. Okay. And $24 billion to go to Ukraine. I mean, really? We're not that dumb. 12 times 2 is 24. He wants twice as much money to go to Ukraine. And he wants another $4 billion to try and deal with the challenges at the border, which, according to Karine Jean-Pierre, the rocket scientist that she is, I love saying that. I mean, this is not, I don't want to be unkind. She used to come on my show all the time, and I always appreciated it because it was hard to get Democrats on the show. Were they scared of me? I don't know. Like they didn't always want to come on, but Karine would come on and she was lovely, but she was really sometimes out of her element even back then. And now she's got the firing squad at her, right? And she's got to handle the press and they're like, hey, you know, what's he doing on the border? And this is her reaction. Listen.
The president has done more to secure the border and to deal with this issue of immigration than anybody else. He really has.
Yeah, he really has. You just keep saying it. It's just like you keep saying Bidenomics is working. Bidenomics is working. Bidenomics is working. You keep telling yourself that, yet, oh dear, we got the unemployment report today. Doesn't look so good. I'll bring you those numbers. But first, here's why apparently Bidenomics is working, according to the president today.
Thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, which I might add, not a single member of the other party voted for.
Good.
We're making the most significant investment in clean energy and combating the existential threat of climate change that's ever been made anywhere in the world.
Which is why Bidenomics is working, according to him, except that it's not. Inflation's up. The latest read has it up 0.2%. And don't forget, it went way up. I mean, we were near double digits on the increase in consumer prices. Unbelievable. I think the final number was somewhere around 9.6%. It was up around 11% in terms of producer prices. And that was all under Joe Biden. So like we go way up and then he's like, oh, we're coming down. We're coming down. No, it's working. It's working. No, it's not working. We just got the latest reads back up. And by the way, you want to talk about problems. We're now looking at a stagflationary environment. Why? Oh, because you see the jobs numbers, they came out today. We saw 187,000 jobs added to the economy in the month of August. That is not good, folks. All right. I'm just going to tell you, like for you to barely keep pace with population growth, you need to be adding around 400,000 jobs a month. So to get 187 is like not good, like not good. And you saw, of course, the tick upwards in the unemployment rate to 3.8%. This is Bidenomics for you. All that climate initiative stuff, all that money going into the system. Oh, it's really working. It's really working. Meanwhile, did you see him later on? So he also did this FEMA thing because he's running off to Florida because he's got to get down to Florida and prove to everybody he's not going to pull another Maui event. Don't want to have that happen again, right? So he's going to go to Florida. He announces this to reporters, but oh my goodness, I saw this. And it's a little uncomfortable to watch because you're like, oh, we just saw Mitch McConnell just the other day. Mitch McConnell, this is tragic stuff, right? Like at some point you get old and things happen. But in this case, these people that are getting old and things are happening, well, they're happening and they're still running the country, which is more terrifying. Here is Joe Biden telling reporters where he's going to Florida, and then he's really struggling. Watch what happens after.
I am going to Florida. I'm going to Florida Saturday morning.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Listen.
Where am I going now?
They go right this way. Secretary, right this way.
Doesn't know where to go.
Come this way.
All right, a little bit of news there. The president says he's going to go visit Florida.
And thank goodness the cameras were turned away. I mean, I actually, regardless of what you think of Mitch McConnell, you can't help but feel bad for the guy when he's clearly having, as they say, a senior moment, right? It's more than a senior moment. When that's happening on cameras, at least the president in that case, I guess, was turned around so you couldn't see the blank stare on his face, although we've seen it before. Anyway, he's up there in age. Every poll shows it. It'll be interesting to see if he makes it through. Gavin Newsom is waiting in the wings. I think if the Democrats were smart, they would have primaried Joe Biden, just like they should have primaried Jimmy Carter. And, they might have a shot with somebody like Newsom, dare I say. I mean, I don't know as they did. I mean, they'd have a better shot than they would with Biden, let's be honest. Like anybody but Biden, except for Kamala Harris. You definitely don't want Kamala Harris. Definitely. But if you put Gavin Newsom in there, he's going to have to deal with the whole California thing. Like nobody wants to work or live in California. I mean, have you been to San Francisco lately? I was just talking to a friend who had just been out there. It was bad 20 years ago when I lived there. It's really bad now. Really, really bad. And you see all the companies pulling their operations out. Nordstrom's, which had been there for years and years and years, pulling out of Union Square. This is what's happening in places in California under the leadership of Gavin Newsom. So I don't think he has a great national platform, but it's got to be better than Joe Biden's, right? And in the meantime, you get the extremists on the left trying to take out Donald Trump, now using the 14th Amendment. For goodness sakes, the 14th Amendment, this is their new legal strategy, and the media is covering, and AP has a whole thing on how this could happen. I'm like, how exactly would this work, guys? Let me show you the thesis coming to us from Mr. Robert Reich, former Labor Secretary under Clinton. Just watch a short clip of this.
Donald Trump should not be allowed on the ballot. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment prohibits anyone who has held public office and taken an oath to protect the Constitution from holding office again if they, quote, have engaged in insurrection against the United States. This key provision was enacted after the Civil War to prevent those who rose up against our democracy from ever being allowed to hold office again. This applies to Donald Trump. He cannot again be entrusted with public office.
I'm sorry, but where? In those 91 counts, I mean, we're talking 4 cases now, everyone. 2 federal, 2 state. And I don't see insurrection in there. I mean, look, I've been through all the cases and they haven't charged him with insurrection. So where are you getting the 14th Amendment stuff? And the reason this is going to get really complicated, keep in mind, is you may have certain states that say, oh yeah, we're going to go forward with this. And you're going to have different lawsuits and they're going to say, okay, well, he can't be on the ballot here. Right? So if you have states saying he can't be on the ballot because we think we've got something with the 14th Amendment, then that has to go all the way through the courts? Are we going to wind up with a constitutional crisis? Is that what they want? It's pretty frightening. I don't know what they want. They seem to want to control us. They want to control our kids. They want our money with higher and higher taxes. They want to confuse everyone. There's now talk of additional lockdowns coming. You know how I feel about those. These are unprecedented, difficult, scary times. And we've got a crew there that's so old and so entrenched in this elite establishment gravy train where they really don't care about you or me or anyone else other than themselves. And like Hillary Clinton said, they're going to fight no matter what, right? They're going to cling on no matter what. That's a frightening mandate. Really. I want to go out to some of your comments. It's just great to have all of you here again as we go into this holiday weekend. I hope you get a little time off for Labor Day. But anyway, I see, yeah, I think a lot of you do agree with me. And you're not fans of California. I get it. Anyway, people are asking about Hawaii. I see that CG is concerned about Hawaii. I understand and sympathize with that, because you know what we have to worry about there. And we had to worry about, the graft, remember, in New Orleans after Katrina and FEMA, and the things not really happening and the money going to the wrong places, because I'm sorry, but like, the government is not the best use of capital in general, right? And there's a lot of cronyism that we have to worry about. And I think that that's going to be a real story. I agree with you, CJ, going forward. Mark is worried about, well, what we're all worried about. I see that, Mark Johnson, because it looks like there's going to be some developments. I mean, I don't want to go too far out on the limb on this story. I'm just going to say that. Like, I think that we are seeing some lockdowns around the country, and they're worried about the new variant, et cetera. And there's lots of talk of, okay, we're going to have to go back to masks and this and that. And there's a lot of people very fearful that this is very intentional. They're trying to get the population sort of used to this so that next fall they can do it again. And then, everybody has to stay home and have mail-in ballots and blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't think, but again, I'm just using my New Hampshire common sense here. I don't think that's a strategy that works, because I think people got really angry with those lockdowns. And they got really angry being told they had to wear masks all the time and they couldn't go somewhere without proof of the vaccination. This actually really infuriated a lot of people, including a lot of people in the middle, right? Like, this was not just, and people on the left. I mean, there were people on the left that were saying, like, this is just getting ridiculous. And so I think it's a poor political strategy. But if the conspiracy theorists, are true, like, or have any leg to stand on here, then that would be pretty alarming. Like, would they actually try and do? I certainly hope not. I think politically it should be a disastrous strategy, but you never know, right? With these people, you really don't. I would be shocked. I'm happy to eat my word. Well, I'm not happy to eat my words on this. Let me tell you, I would be really surprised if they actually did that to us this fall, because I think the political backlash would be massive, like nothing they have seen. But these are people who seem to be willing to take a lot on. And as I said, be willing to put us into some kind of constitutional crisis if need be. So make sure you subscribe. It's really important. If you get a chance, it would be wonderful if you would go over to Apple Podcasts and subscribe to the show and follow the show there. It's all free. And I'd love to have you join me there too. And even if you don't listen to it over there, it helps if you subscribe. And especially if you can leave a nice review and maybe 5 stars. Anyway, I love seeing you all here. Again, thanks for being here. And we'll catch up over the weekend at some point, or certainly on Monday. Love seeing you. We'll talk soon.